my opinion, the Telecaster is one of the greatest musical instrument designs of all time. And I don't mean just guitars. I mean, out of all the musical instruments ever in all of mankind, the Telecaster is one of the best designs ever. And today, every company and builder makes a Tele. They're all a little bit different, and it's easy to get lost in the specs. So let's discuss what makes a great Tele. But first, we have to start with a little bit of context. In my opinion, the true genius of Leo Fender's original Telecaster design is that it's an effective yet simple instrument with a designed and building procedure that lends itself to easy mass manufacturing and thus mass production. In other words, it works and it's cheap. And that certainly isn't an insult. We all know that overused quote by Leonardo da Vinci, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." Well, that idea is at the heart of the Telecaster design. One or two pickups, bolt-on neck, slab of wood body, and that's it. And by the mid-1950s, we had a few other electric guitar designs that would eventually become classics. And when we look at their prices, you'll see that the Tele was always the least expensive, and that makes sense if you equate features to price. The Strat has a vibrato bridge, 3 pickups, comfort contours. The Les Paul has a carved top and a set neck. These are all features that would take more time to make and perhaps more money as well. And as a result, the simple Telecaster design remains the least expensive to this day. And I don't want to go on a side tangent here, but that's also why I roll my eyes when companies or luthiers remake the simplest version of a Telecaster, the original inexpensive design, and then charge $4,000, $5,000. To me, a $3,000 or $4,000 Telecaster is like a $50,000 Honda Civic, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, let's talk about some things to look for in a great Telecaster guitar. And if we start from the headstock, I'm personally a fan of locking tuners because they're just super fast and efficient. And when it comes to a Tele, you don't have to worry about the weight of the tuners causing neck dive because the body is usually pretty substantial anyway. So the slightly heavier locking tuners won't matter and they'll make your life easier. And if you absolutely need a vintage look, I personally prefer the split shaft design to just the regular hole in the post kind of a thing. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me there or if you don't really care either way. And today it's also pretty easy to find a quality nut. Composite nuts are always great. You can get them in black or white, but the tried and true bone nut is also a good option, of course. Now, when we talk about the Tele neck, this is where things are going to be a bit more divisive. There are, of course, many different wood combinations, but the maple neck and maple board is the classic design. The maple neck and the maple board is the classic design. Now, back in the 1950s, they weren't roasting necks, but that will be an option for many brands today. For example, the Sire T7, this has a roasted maple neck, and you can see that when we compare that to the Miles Kennedy signature PRS guitar, which doesn't have a roasted neck. The non-roasted neck is much lighter, the roasted neck is much darker. The whole idea of roasting the maple neck is to essentially suck out any additional moisture and thus create a harder and more stable neck. I also find that roasting the maple makes it feel a bit different in the hand. It's harder and it's noticeably much more lightweight. But with all of that in mind, I personally wouldn't pay extra for a roasted neck, and I probably wouldn't suggest that you do either. Simply put, every roasting procedure is not the same, and few companies actually detail their roasting process. I've tried plenty of non-roasted necks over the years that were super stable, and I've also tried a few roasted necks that were pretty unremarkable. Full transparency, this is one of my favorite guitars ever. I love it so much. But although this has a roasted neck, and it's pretty expensive, it's not very stable. I've had this guitar for less than 6 months. I've adjusted the truss rod 3 times, and it needs another adjustment, as you can hear. So long story short, if a roasted maple neck is included, I'll take it. But for me personally, I wouldn't pay more money for it. The same holds true for fret material. I'm personally a huge fan of quality stainless steel, and many companies offer it today. But the key word is quality. Not all stainless steel, or even nickel for that matter, is made equal. So I'll take nickel frets from an established company over stainless steel frets from a random company that doesn't list their particular fret wire. There's a growing community of people that just believe that stainless steel is always better, which I personally very much disagree with. Even if the tonal differences between stainless steel and nickel are slight, the feel is pretty substantial. As an example, this is a Parker Southern Nightfly, and it has stainless steel frets that are very high quality, very hard. If you're not careful, you can easily overbend on this guitar because the frets just feel so slick. And just for a point of comparison, the PRS Miles Kennedy has nickel frets. I would never have to worry about overbending or having too dramatic of a vibrato on this particular guitar because there's simply much more friction with the left hand because of the nickel frets. So nickel versus stainless steel, this is 100% personal preference and one is not better than the other. As a final point of comparison, the Stele guitar has Evo Gold frets, and Evo Gold in terms of its hardness is somewhere in between nickel and stainless steel. To my hands, it feels a lot more like nickel to stainless steel, but it's going to last much, much longer than nickel. So if you're someone who likes the feel of nickel, but you don't want to have to worry about replacing your frets every, 3-5 years, whatever the case may be, I do recommend you give Evo Gold a try. Now, a lot of my Teles are actually very hard to find, but I will leave a list below of my favorite Teles available on Sweetwater. And of course, when you use my Sweetwater link, it's an easy way to help out the channel with no additional cost to you. Let's move on to next shape and thickness. Most Teles that I've tried over the last 20 years have a C-shaped neck, but the thickness of that C will vary fairly dramatically. The Sire, the JBE, and my Parker Tele back there, they all have what I would consider a standard modern C shape in terms of its thickness. In my experience, most companies that list modern C will have a thickness around this range. But since there's no universal shape or thickness guide, these explanations will always be a range. Most of these guitars have the same shape across the entire neck, so I'm not going to be taking multiple measurements. We're just taking one measurement right at the dot inlay on the 3rd fret. The Sire T7 is 21.2 millimeters, and the Parker Southern Nightfly 23.1. The JBE is 23.7 millimeters. And then there are, of course, necks that are listed as chunky or fat or thick. And I'd say that the Stele and the Squire are great examples of what I would consider the chunky neck range. Squire is 24 millimeters. The Stele is 24.3 millimeters. And of course, there are even bigger necks. The Miles Kennedy PRS measured in at 25.5 millimeters. And the Richie Kotzen Signature Fender Tele is also pretty big, but I don't have a measurement for that as well. When you get to that size, in my opinion, you really need to know what you're getting into. For some people, even people who like thicker necks, a size of 25.5 or bigger might just be too big. I personally love it, but I do have fairly big hands. Again, this is all personal preference. Now, fretboard radius is another area that is going to have a pretty big range, but most Teles I see today are somewhere between 9.5 and 14. It can get as round as 7.5 or so, and as flat as 20. I know that 14, 16 or so and above is pretty intimidating for some people because there's this idea that the flatter fretboards are harder to play in terms of your open position chords down here on the guitar. As a result, we also have compound radii like that found on the Fender American Ultra Series. I'll just say this, I personally believe that flatter radii are massively underrated and the comfort provided by a rounder radius in open position massively overrated. Don't be afraid to give a flatter radius an honest try for an extended period of time, and I think you may be surprised about how comfortable it can be even if you're playing down here once you get used to it. I explored the radius topic in far more detail in my Sean Lane VGR video. I'll link it up here when it's ready. Now, I don't want to get into the tone wood debate here today, but I'll just say that a lot of Teles are made out of ash and there are other options. Whether or not you care is totally up to you. Let's just talk about Tele body shapes and contours. I find it very interesting that many players will vary in terms of what they prefer in terms of the body contours. One of my favorite musicians of all time, Richie Kotzen, he loves Teles. So I'm editing the video and I went to Sweetwater to get a picture of the Richie Kotzen Tele, which I've also wanted for a while and which I also really like. And I just saw that there's one used for $1,200, and that's a really great deal. And now I'm thinking I might have to get it. But he prefers the contours on the back and on the top. And I would have honestly thought that everyone will prefer contours since they are more comfortable. But another one of my favorite guitar players, Josh Smith, he also has a signature Tele, but it has no contours whatsoever, and he specifically did not want it to have contours. So we have a Fender Telecaster with contours and Ibanez Tele with no contours, original slab wood design, the guitar world is so very interesting. I'll just say that I personally believe that the carving on the back of the guitar is more important than the actual forearm contour, although of course your opinion may vary. And that's exactly what they did here with the Squier Tele, which is a shockingly good guitar for the price. Which just goes to show again that you don't need a super expensive Tele for it to actually be a great guitar. When it comes to tones, it's hard to beat a Telecaster for an overall guitar in terms of its simplicity and its versatility. And if you're teaching yourself guitar or you're learning online and you like all types of music, you'll definitely want to check out my course link below. It's designed to bring any guitar player up to that intermediate level where they can start learning from resources online without any issues or questions. And this Squier Tele is actually a great place to start in that regard. 2 single coil pickups, a 3-position switch, master volume, master tone. That will be the most common Tele setup, and these 3 options, even on an inexpensive Squier, it's just super versatile. The neck pickup, we get a beautiful jazz tone. The middle position, we get our funk tone. And the bridge pickup can get as heavy as metal. And of course, country, which I definitely can't play, and blues tones are available for all 3 pickup positions. It truly is an incredibly versatile setup. One thing to consider is that you will have hum in 2 of the 3 positions. Some people don't mind it, some people actually like it. I personally prefer noiseless single coil pickups. My favorite noiseless single coil pickup set is by DiMarzio, and I'll link that below as well. In my opinion, you just get all of the goodness and more of a normal Tele, but you don't get any of the noise, so it's a win-win in that regard. Still editing the video, I just remembered that I have this Tele, which has a fat neck and amazing ergonomics, and then I put the same Richie Kotzen DiMarzio pickups in that guitar, specifically so I wouldn't have to buy the Richie Kotzen signature guitar. So no, I'm not going to impulse buy that Tele. There is also, of course, the deluxe Telecaster design with 2 humbuckers, but I don't have an example of that here today. But this example is actually my favorite, where we have a single coil in the bridge and a humbucker in the neck. Now, if you go online, you're going to read a crazy debate about which humbucker should be in the neck. I don't know exactly which is the best one. I don't want to enter the debate myself personally. I will just say that for the neck pickup in a Tele, it should be a fairly low output humbucker, and that is what we have here with the Arcane pickup. And it does the Tele neck humbucker thing, of course. Now, there's also going to be a lot of debate about the Tele bridge, especially when it comes to brass saddles versus non-brass saddles, compensated versus non-compensated, and so on. The best option, in my opinion, is the brass individual saddle bridge. And there are a ton of companies who make these, and again, since it's a Telecaster, these parts should be fairly inexpensive, so it's very reasonable to go out and switch to that if you're interested. And I've been thinking about doing that with this guitar eventually, adding the 6 individual saddles, because it does not intonate perfectly, even though it does have compensated saddles, so maybe we'll do that eventually. And if you appreciate this Tele deep dive, go ahead and give this video a like to support the channel. And now I want to talk about my favorite topic, which is special features, because the Tele's simplicity allows for some pretty interesting variations in design that are still fairly affordable compared to other guitars. For example, Steve Klein is a builder in high demand and his guitars cost a lot of money. When he wanted to make a more affordable version of his Klein style guitar, he made the Stele. Steve Klein Stele. So, of course, the main feature of this guitar is the fact that it has an ergonomic body that just sits on you perfectly. And this is my favorite Tele. I'll link a video of it when it's complete right up here. And another example of a Tele with some pretty cool special features is the Parker Southern Nightfly. Now, of course, we do have the composite fretboard with glued on stainless steel frets, and that is special and unique and only found on this guitar. But we also have a Fishman power bridge system so that you can get beautiful acoustic sounds right from this guitar. You can combine it with the electric pickups or have it by itself, and you can actually buy this Fishman power bridge and install it into your own Tele. It's pretty cost effective. So again, the inexpensive nature of the Tele makes for these mods to be fairly inexpensive and a lot of fun. And of course, another interesting special feature is to have the neck humbucker, but the ability to split it. That's the thought. And when you have the split coil feature on a neck humbucker, you can still get pretty close to the Teles single coil sound, but then of course you have the full humbucker sound as well. And then we have something like the PRS Miles Kennedy signature guitar, which actually has dual humbuckers, but they're smaller humbuckers and they have a 5-position switch and a push-pull knob to change the sounds even more. So in this case, we have a pretty versatile and very original kind of configuration and layout and lots of different tones, but we still have a lot of that Tele essence. By the way, I'm Andre Flood. My Patreon and courses are linked below, and I'll talk to you soon.